Welcome back to the PRI studio here in the exhibition hall at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. I'm really delighted to be bringing you this session on a really important topic about whether organisations have the skills and knowledge to stay competitive in this evolving responsible investment market. And to join me discussing this topic, we have Anthony Roberts, PRI's Director of Investor Education, and Herry Cho, Head of Sustainability and Sustainable Finance for SGX Group. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for joining. You've literally just finished your breakout session and we rushed you over here, so we're so glad to have you. You can't watch Herry and Anthony's session live, they've just finished it, but it will be available for you to watch on demand, so please go back and watch that later. And we're going to be putting your questions to Herry and Anthony. You can submit them on Slido on the right-hand side of your screen. Just make sure to select Live Studio when you do that. We're actually going to kick off this conversation with a poll for you, our audience. So we want to hear from you on Slido. If your organisation currently have in place any company-wide training on ESG, and we're going to come back later to your answers on that. And as I said, please also submit any questions that you have on this really important topic. So Anthony, obviously our audience didn't watch the breakout that you just had, so I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you can kind of summarise what were the key takeaways?
Sure, so we had a fantastic session exploring the challenges that the ESG skills gap creates for organizations when they try to disseminate and implement their responsible investment strategies. And this really built on some work that we presented at PRI in person in Tokyo, where a researcher from Cambridge Judge Business School, Yusha Zhou, presented research that showed the single most robust factor in predicting whether and how long an organization stays committed to responsible investment was whether they train the wider teams. And clearly that is a major finding. That is really important for the mission of the PRI and really important for how we globally try to progress responsible investment practice. And I think what it indicated was you can no longer confine responsible investment skills to a small specialist team. It's absolutely critical that every investment professional today is as comfortable and confident talking in the language of ESG, working in the practice of responsible investment, as they are talking about market performance or portfolio allocations. And unless you can communicate to clients what you're doing with responsible investment, unless you can fully integrate responsible investment practice into your risk management, your investment process, you won't realize the benefits. You won't get those capital attractions. You will not necessarily get the risk-adjusted returns you're hoping for. And as a result, you will see responsible investment as a cost rather than a benefit. And so this session started to explore that issue in a little bit more detail. So what are these skills gaps? And Herry will talk about some pioneering research from Singapore, which is really important in taking forward this conversation. But also what works. And we wanted to hear what industry initiatives have been effective, what training programs, how do you integrate this need to understand and upskill on responsible investment into the culture of the organization, the ways of working, the way it does business, so that it truly changes people's practice. And what we got from the session was it's a huge problem. There is a huge challenge ahead. The scale and speed that's required is enormous, but there are real reasons to be optimistic.
And that's been a theme across the whole of this PRI 2024, hasn't it? About reasons to be optimistic and positive changes that can come. I'm sure we're going to get some questions from the audience about some of the specific solutions to that wider problem. Herry, coming to you, a study was conducted in Singapore to analyse the green skills gap in financial services sector. Could you share a bit about why that study was done and what the results were from that one?
Yeah, sure. So some of you may know that actually 14% of the GDP contribution is the financial sector in Singapore. So it's a hugely important sector for the Singapore economy overall. As you may also know, Singapore is a bit of a hub for regional financial services as well. So already back in 2019, actually, there was a mapping study done which formed the basis of the work that we did this year. So in 2019, there was a mapping study done of 218 job descriptions or JDs across every single job family in any financial sector across all subsectors, whether it's banking, wealth management, asset management, etc., to articulate what is the JD for every single one of those 218 jobs, what are the technical skill sets and competencies that are required, and what are some of the softer skill sets and new skill sets that's going to be important. This year, there was a job transformation map for sustainable finance work that was done, of which I was quite privileged to have been one of the steering committee members driving the work, to see, okay, so we have this overall map of the financial sector, but what's the role of the sustainable finance that's going to be in some ways scary or disruptive as we were thinking about it, unless we break it down and make it practical and implementable. So as you can see on the slide that you see on the on the slide now, to give 4 key insights that came out of it, and then the outcomes of that. Of course, this only launched earlier this year, so there's some further work to be done. 56% of those job roles will require quite high or moderate augmentation of the skill sets and competencies. And that's not in 10 years' time. We are looking at, per point number 2, in the next 3 years. Okay, so there's a level of urgency that's required at a systemic level. Number 3, out of those jobs, there were identification of unique job roles that actually probably need to be prioritized a little bit in terms of upskilling, because they are the most augmented roles over time. And fourthly, and by the way, 56% of job roles in Singapore is about 50,000 jobs. Okay. And there will be new jobs created on the back of this too. And those may be, for example, sustainability risk jobs, sustainability strategy jobs, and that would be to the tune of about 4,000, 5,000. On the back of this very granular analysis done, there were 35 million Singapore dollars, or 27 million US dollars put aside by Monetary Authority of Singapore to enable the teaching that needs to be done there. Yeah, and maybe I can talk in a bit about the how this can be applied on a global basis.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because these are incredible insights and really useful, but they're related to Singapore.
Yeah.
And obviously Singapore has its own unique features. So how do we apply this globally?
Yeah, so of course, the JD descriptions, I mean, a portfolio manager is a portfolio manager whether you're sitting in the US, in London, or in Singapore or Hong Kong for that matter too. And so I think the JDs themselves are useful, the technical skill sets themselves are useful, but if we widen the stakeholder base beyond just individual job roles, per the second slide that's now up, there are a few stakeholders who are really important in catalyzing the work that needs to be done, right? In finding those solutions. To pick a few out, the government bodies, whether it's the regulators or the governments themselves, certification bodies, can work together with industry associations, for example, to define quite specific certification and accreditation programs so that there is a level of understanding on what are the sort of the minimal as well as important necessary skill sets and accreditations that's required. And importantly, we all know that the financial sector, as important as we are, investors, etc., we can't drive the real economy change by ourselves. So for the government bodies, industry associations to continuously connect the two together so that we are actually tying the two up. Financial institutions and government bodies can also work together. For example, one of the findings that really interestingly came out from numerous interviews that were done to derive this study as well, there were lots of modeling done as well, but there were also stakeholder interviews, was that actually, you know what, for many of the sustainable finance professionals, what is next? If you want to actually continue your career, let's say you become head of CSO, what next? There is not that obvious a path. And so governments and financial institutions can work together to help continuously chart the career paths. Financial institutions themselves can actually look at, okay, so now that we know what the skill sets are, Actually, in some regions, do they have better level of augmentation than others? So then how do you actually cross-fertilize within the own firm by doing things like short-term assignments and then work together with the training providers to actually come up with fit-for-purpose training? And at the bottom, you'll see how different parts of an organization can use this for career charting, DIY, to do it yourself, chart your own path. What do you need to know? If there's another role you want to go into, look at that. What is that? Human resources, business unit heads at the C-suite level, they can all look at this for business strategic planning, as well as workforce planning, as well as learning and development needs.
Amazing. And you're talking there about the importance of collaboration and different bodies being involved, and we're going to talk very shortly about the PRI's role and what they can do in that. But before we do that, we're going to go to the poll results. So we asked you, our audience, does your organisation currently have in place any company-wide training on ESG? And 67% of you said no, this training is limited to a small number of individuals and functions. Anthony, does that result surprise you at all?
It doesn't surprise me, but I think what's really come through very clearly this conference and last conference is this need for a common language and understanding of what responsible investment is, and just how critical that is, and especially as responsible investment in some markets has become more politicized, how important it is to have your client-facing staff being able to really clearly articulate what you are doing, what you're not doing, what responsible investment is, what it's not, and how you're approaching that. And it's just such an important part of moving forward progress, is having this common language and understanding.
It really is. So then in that context, how are PRI helping their signatories with this big gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So the research we saw in Tokyo was really instrumental in changing how PRI thought about training. It was always a very important part of our offering, but I think it became so apparent that this was one of the most significant obstacles for organizations, and therefore, advancing our mission required making industry training a critical part of the work of PRI. So we've been developing out our PRI Academy. So PRI Academy provides short, practical and applied online training courses for investment professionals. We're here today launching 2 new courses. So we have a short course, Responsible Investment in 60 Minutes, which is designed precisely for that purpose of building the common understanding of responsible investment. We've launched a short course on nature and biodiversity. We know it's a really important emergent issue. There have been speakers across the event this week talking about how investors need to begin to integrate these risks and opportunities into how they're thinking about investments and ownership decisions. So we're creating those short specialist training courses on new topics designed to really upskill professionals. And then turning to something that Herry talks about, we want to create aspiration in this. So we want to have really clear pathways so that whether you're in distribution, whether you're a portfolio manager, an analyst, there's always another way that you can upskill in responsible investment. And you can be a leader in responsible investment in a distribution role just as much as you can be a leader in responsible investment in an ESG team. So I think critical to our mission, I think what we heard in the session today really was that organizations are now seeing this isn't a separate skill set. You can't confine it to a separate team. You need to integrate these skills into the ways of working, the culture of the organization, the business decisions. And what I love about the study in Singapore is this use of the term augmented skills. This isn't suggesting to people we're going to teach you a new way to be an investment analyst or an entirely different way to run a portfolio. It's about giving people a new set of skills to make better investment decisions, to think about the risks and opportunities that they have. And it's just so positively cast in that study.
Oh, it's really coming across as well. And for our audience, where can they find more about the PRI Academy or even sign up for a course?
Absolutely. So we have priacademy.org is our website. You can find information there about all our courses. Please do go on there. You can demo the new courses. We'd love to get your feedback. And of course, for those who are here, we have a stand and a presence, and we're speaking to lots of organizations who are really starting to get to grips with this challenge of how do they upskill, how do they build capacity.
Amazing. Well, let's go to our audience questions. And as I said, you can submit questions now on Slido on the right-hand side of your screen. Just make sure to select Live Studio. If you can't see Slido, just exit full screen mode. So, first question, how can I make the case internally to our leaders to invest in responsible investment education across the organisation? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I can start. I think you'll definitely have some insights from the work that you've done. And I think we've seen the research. We know it is the single most robust factor in predicting whether you're going to realise the benefits of your responsible investment strategy. And for that reason, there is a very clear business case. And I think, in the session today, what came across very clearly was you should not be thinking about this differently from any investment. You should be thinking about, what is the business case for this? How do we incorporate responsible investment into everything we do? And so, it's a very clear, very rational case that can be put forward for why organizations should seek to upskill. But it's also important that training just doesn't sit alone. That's one part of the solution. It's about a change in the culture and the ways of working of organizations.
Herry, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add to that. So, the study I mentioned, what I do love about the work that has been done is we haven't taken sustainable finance or sustainable investing in isolation. Every single skill set that has been identified for every single one of those 218 job roles, and for our attendee who's asked that question, your job will be in that 218 as well. It's been fitted inside the broader JD and the technical skill sets that a JD requires, and the sustainable investing skill sets have been included as either high level of augmentation required and the level of urgency moderate or low. And so what that shows is actually if you do have functions within your institution which are going to be highly where high augmentation is required, and you do not actually take that advice, then actually any good business should be doing risk management of disruption that is to come to the business. So I would highly encourage you to look at the study that was done, because it really integrates into one, not just sustainability skill set, but every skill set or job needs. It's just that sustainable skill sets are going to be part and parcel of a JD tomorrow.
And you raised an interesting point there about quoting studies, and actually we had a fascinating discussion yesterday with two of the winners of the research prize.
Yeah.
And there is compelling research out there that can make this case. So if your leaders, kind of brush it aside and say it doesn't actually impact our bottom line, I think there is more and more research and stats you can get now to back you up. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the PRI study from last year shows that it's the single biggest determinant, right, of how well an organization embeds it. But yeah, there are many other studies out there too.
Fantastic. Okay, our next question. Do you think beyond the private sector, there is a role for government and industry bodies in addressing the skills gap? And I know, Herry, you kind of touched on that earlier, but could you answer that question?
Yeah. So, so also going back to the question that was asked, the first question that was asked, I'll put it into the Singapore context. Even the study that was done had actually about 3-4 different entities, right? So it had the regulator, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the financial accreditation body. Those are the two who commissioned the work. There was a consultant who actually did the work, right? And then the steering committee members and many other agencies, government agencies that looks at the workforce planning overall, financial workforce planning. I mean, it was just such a big orchestration, right? So when you have different bodies coming together and actually even sharing information, you suddenly realize that actually, you know what? This task is a lot easier if we can solve it together. And we are missing the point on hitting the most important points if we don't talk to each other. And so we would really strongly say any jurisdiction, ideally, would be talking within the community, but also actually talk to between one community to another. So that's why I was so keen to share what was done here. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to share about it, because we need to be learning from each other on this.
Fantastic. Okay, on to our next question. They're coming in thick and fast. What kind of impact do you think the multiplication of ESG-focused degrees at universities will have on this skills gap? Will we be in a completely different situation in 5 years' time?
It's a great question. I think it's a rapidly evolving area. I mean, 6-7 years ago, you would have come to a PRI in person, and the skills gap people would have been discussing would be how do we create this next generation of really informed ESG leaders who can set the strategy, the vision for our organizations. But look around you here, there are 1,700 of those people. And now we're starting to think of the skills gap slightly differently. We're thinking, well, how do we get the wider organization beginning to address these issues? But I think what's been really encouraging is, whilst we've been here, we've spoken to a number of universities, educational institutions, everyone accepts the need that sustainability skills, responsible investment understanding, and understanding of ESG issues is just critical to business education now. And the future leaders in business, whether they're investment management or not, will need to understand that. Organizations will need to disclose more. They'll need to address their environmental, social, and governance risks. Investors will be thinking about them in those ways, and it will become as core to a business education as understanding how to discount cash flows are. And I think that's really exciting. So yes, I think we'll be looking at a very different situation in 5, 6, 10 years. But there will always be the challenge. This is a fast-moving, fast-evolving field, and we need to find ways to continue to take the sector and professionals with us.
And Herry, is there a risk then that we have, we have lots of leaders who are engaged and aware, and then we'll have a younger generation coming through who are, and we might have a whole swathe of people who are middle management who in some ways could be left behind in this process?
Well, so I think that's why it's important to identify which of the, because it's not just about creation of new jobs, as I said. There's like there's only 10% versus 4,000, 5,000 new jobs, but 50,000 of augmentation required, right? So, actually they can be left behind if they do not even if the firm themselves don't support the training, do it for yourself. Actually, our own Singapore Exchange CEO, this is what he tells our staff, right? We will provide you with the training, but I really encourage you to do this for your own career and for your own future, because we would love for you to stay here. But if you ever plan to move on, you'll be that much more equipped and a more attractive candidate for any role you want to do. And just one point on the training front, I think not only sort of the middle sort of mid professionals, but also in the schools. What's really important is a very practical training. So coming from practitioners as much as possible, not only those who are wearing sustainability hat, but people from different departments who are really involved in it together with the different teams, for them to be sharing, that's a really powerful tool.
Amazing, and that's such a great final point to end on, and to echo your points there, take the initiative yourselves to get educated. That's an investment in yourself and your future wherever you work. Herry, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. We had lots more questions. We could have spent more time on this topic. I would really encourage you to go back and watch their breakout session earlier on demand. So thank you both. We are now taking a 5-minute break, and we'll be back live from the plenary with a session on the road to COP16 and COP29. How can investors accelerate action on climate and biodiversity?